Chapter 5, Section 2. Sectional Differences Divide the Nation. The Ohio River meanders for nearly 1,000 miles from its origins in western Pennsylvania to the Mississippi River at Cairo, Illinois. The Ohio has played a significant role in American history. It served as a main route for westward migration into the old Northwest Territory. It also served as a boundary between North and South. The Northwest Ordinance of 1787 declared that all lands north of the Ohio would be free of slaves, leaving slavery allowable in lands to the south. This law helped make the creation of new western states easier for a time, but it did not solve the problem of slavery. As the country expanded, sectional differences over slavery increasingly divided the country. Slavery comes to the national stage, the Missouri Compromise. In the early 1800s, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois applied for statehood. Because they were all north of the Ohio River, they entered the Union as free states. During the same period, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, all south of the Ohio, entered as slave states. By 1819, the number of slave states and free states was balanced at 11 each. That meant neither North nor South had a controlling majority in the Senate. But that year, Missouri, which lay to the west of the Ohio River, applied for admission as a slave state. If admitted, Missouri would tip the balance of power in the Senate toward the South. Suddenly, slavery became a national issue. Northerners in Congress protested that most of Missouri lay north of the point where the Ohio River met the Mississippi. By all rights, they said, it should be a free state. They also worried that making Missouri a slave state might turn the rest of Louisiana Territory toward slavery. So they insisted that Missouri could only enter as a free state. Southern senators disagreed. Congress was deadlocked. When the Senate took up the matter again in 1820, however, things had changed. Maine was asking to join the Union as a free state. This opened the way for a deal known as the Missouri Compromise, which was sponsored by Speaker of the House Henry Clay. Under the terms of the compromise, Missouri would enter the Union as a slave state and Maine as a free state, preserving the balance of power in the Senate. In addition, the law drew a line across the Louisiana Territory at latitude 3630. North of that line, slavery would be banned. South of that line, it would be permitted. The Missouri Compromise broke the deadlock in the Senate, but it pleased no one. Northerners were angry about the extension of slavery to Missouri. Southerners disliked the ban on slavery in much of the Louisiana Territory. The compromise eased tension temporarily, but it was not a permanent solution. Meanwhile, nothing had been settled about the future of slavery. Reflecting on this failure, John Quincy Adams wrote in his diary, "I have favored this Missouri Compromise, believing it to be all that could be effected under the present Constitution, and from extreme unwillingness to put the Union at hazard. If the Union must be dissolved, slavery is precisely the question on which it ought to break. For the present, however, the contest is laid asleep." John Quincy Adams, 1820. Two ways of life, the North and the South. The dispute between North and South over Missouri was more than a battle over slavery. It was a conflict over different ways of life. Sectionalism, or a strong attachment to regional interests, had become a major issue in American politics. By mid-century, the North was becoming increasingly urban, as people migrated from farms to cities in search of economic opportunities. In the Northeast, between 1800 to 1860, the percentage of the population living in cities grew from 9 to 35%. Some cities grew very fast. The population of New York City, for example, soared during that time from 60,000 to more than 800,000. Waves of immigration, mostly from Ireland and Germany, helped swell populations. In contrast, the South was still predominantly rural in 1860. Most of the population lived on small farms or large plantations scattered across the countryside. The largest southern city, New Orleans, had a population of only 169,000 people. The economies of the two regions were also different. Although agriculture was still a significant part of the North's economy, workshops, factories, and mills also churned out large amounts of manufactured goods. Most of the immigrants entering the country in the 1840s and 1850s settled in the North because that was where the jobs were. A growing network of canals and railroad lines in the North helped carry the products of mills and factories to customers. By 1860, more than 20,000 miles of rail lines crisscrossed the northern half of the country. These lines connected the cities and factories of the Northeast with the farming regions of the Midwest. In contrast, the South invested much less in transportation and had only half as many rail lines. Instead, it relied on rivers for transportation. Unlike the North, the South had little industry in 1860. Its economy continued to be based on the export of agricultural products. Rice, corn, and cotton all grew well in the South, with cotton being the most important of the three crops. Some white Southerners owned large plantations worked by large numbers of slaves, but most were small farmers who depended on family members for labor. Only 1 in 4 Southern households owned slaves. Still, plantation agriculture and slave labor formed the basis of the Southern economy. Without slavery, the plantation system would collapse, causing great economic harm to the South. For that reason, most Southerners saw abolitionism as a threat to their economy and way of life.